Hello and welcome to another segment of Engaging in Excellence, brought to you by the Morris University Center at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. Today we'll review leadership and explore various ideas that suggest everyone is a leader. So what does a great leader look like? When you think of a leader, who is the first person that pops in your head? Many people say influential people like Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., and so on. Historically, people have had this view that good leaders are charismatic, tall, passionate, and often men. This is referred to as trait theory, which says that a person is predisposed to being a leader if they possess certain traits, which sounds good in theory, but it doesn't tell the whole leadership story. There's many people who might not be visible, famous, or groundbreaking, and yet they're great leaders. From our perspective, a leader is anyone who intentionally makes a difference by influencing others to structure their behaviors, relationships, or ideals in a new or directed way. They strive for the group to share a common goal, often through passionate dialogue or behavioral modeling that speaks to others and influences them to believe in the leader's vision. Leaders often come in different forms, and some even wear more than one hat at any time. For example, some leaders are figureheads or spokespeople. We often assume that most leaders fit into these roles because they are most visible. However, we also look to a leader when they are our negotiator, expert, coach, problem solver, or strategic planner. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list, but hopefully it extends your thoughts on what being a leader means. So, how is leadership different from management? This is a common question that many ask. Above, we see that leaders advocate for change, plan for the long term, and deliver a vision, whereas managers often cope with change, focus on short-term goals, and follow the vision that's provided by the leader. And there's certainly a big push to be a leader and not just a supervisor or manager. However, effective leadership would not be successful without these change drivers or managers. It's true that there are effective and ineffective managers and leaders in the world, but there is nothing inherently wrong with being either. In some cases, managers are our leaders, and in others, our leader isn't necessarily the manager. Today, we'll discuss the various ways in which we experience leaders. From that, hopefully you'll be able to recognize the pros and cons with each type of leader, consider your own leadership style, and also identify some characteristics you'd like to adopt so you can be the leader that you want to be. So let's take a moment for a quiz. Consider each statement and determine if you agree or disagree. First, I long to make a difference. I don't wait for more resources to work toward my vision. I see what is, but ask what could be. I don't have to be in charge to make a difference. I foster unity by bringing people together and encouraging dialogue. I admit mistakes and find ways to fix it. I value relationships more than tasks. I walk my talk, not perfectly, but sincerely. If you answered yes to a few of these statements, there will be situations where you will lead. It's something that we call a situation contingent leader. If you answered yes to most of these statements, you may be what we call a habitual leader, or someone who naturally takes on leadership roles, either formally or informally. There are a number of leadership styles that have been used for leadership theory and practice, and we'll review some of them. The first of which is the authoritarian or autocratic leader. This type of leadership refers to the climate where a leader makes executive decisions and they provide very clear and very precise expectations. In situations where there is little time for group decision making or when the leader is most knowledgeable, this can be a very effective style. A good example of what authoritarian leadership looks like is in military combat settings, where the leader must give orders and those orders are accepted by the group. This form of leadership is hard to find in academic or corporate settings, especially as more organizations are beginning to flatten or have more shared leadership rather than this hierarchical organizational chart. The next leadership style we'll discuss is democratic leadership. This style of leadership is preferred by many because these leaders encourage their group members to participate in the decision-making and idea-sharing process. Democratic leaders also offer guidance and feedback to their group as a way to enhance and develop their group members. Research even shows that compared to the authoritarian leader that we just discussed, the democratic groups produce less, but their quality of work is better, and the individuals report higher satisfaction at work when they have a democratic leader. So, unless you're in a situation where you need an authoritarian leader, people prefer to be in democratic settings where they work with their leader and contribute to the goals of the group. Next, we have laissez-faire leadership, which means allow to do in French. This type of leadership adopts the mindset of letting things take their own course and not interfering with your group. Essentially, it's a very hands-off approach. And sometimes these laissez-faire leaders, they tend to be checked out, or they may not identify themselves as a leader, and thus fail to engage in those behaviors that are in line with their leader role. Typically, groups who are headed by a laissez-faire leader feel confused and uncertain of their goals and priorities. So then, members of the group often blame each other, refuse to take responsibility for failures or hardships, and produce less than quality work. This style of leadership is really only effective for groups who do not need a leader to direct them, which usually means the group has defined their own group roles and they follow them very strictly, or each member is an expert at what they do, which means that they, again, don't need a leader. The previous leadership types focused on how the leader acts in a group, which essentially ignores the characteristics of the members. We have come to find out that the leadership style that works in one situation may not work in all situations. For example, we reviewed the authoritarian leaders and how they're more effective in those dangerous, time-sensitive fields where it's not feasible to invite your group members to participate in decision-making, like in the case for military or emergency responding groups. So the type of leadership that addresses this criticism that leadership isn't one size fits all is situational leadership, which refers to the leader adjusting themselves to the needs of the individual or of the group. So research has shown that leaders tend to focus either on tasks or people, or some combination of the two. So this chart above shows directive or task behaviors on the x-axis and supportive or people behaviors on the y-axis. The chart demonstrates that the more competent or proficient someone is at their job, the less direction they need. Likewise, the more committed people are to their jobs, the less support they need from the leader. So, if you have someone at work who is very competent but not very committed to the organization yet, you may want to support them so they feel a sense of belonging to the organization and its goals. Feel free to take a few moments and pause the presentation and consider the 4 types of situational leadership. We have supporting, coaching, delegating, and directing. So what style of leadership should you adopt based on the characteristics of your group members? What style of leadership do you want your leader or boss to adopt to help you at work? If you're unsure of your group's commitment and proficiency level, this may be a sign that you should get to know your group's attitudes and competencies more comprehensively. There are numerous myths related to leadership, and we'll review some of them now. The first is this idea that I can't lead, I don't have a position of authority. Well, if you define leadership as someone who has a title and imposes their will onto others, then maybe you're right, you're not a leader. However, this definition has been the demise of many organizations. The truth is, if you pursue your passions or strengths, and in that inspire or influence someone else to do better, you're a leader. Being a leader is about having the ability to positively influence others, and each one of us is capable of doing that. The second myth says, I'm just not a natural take charge person. It is true that there are habitual leaders, or people who seem predisposed to lead and influence others on a continuous basis. However, there are also situation contingent leaders, or people who find themselves in a situation where it makes sense for them to lead in that moment or in that situation based on their expertise or the factors at play. And we certainly all have these moments, or we will have these moments later on. The third myth talks about I'm an introvert, and we have this idea that leaders are always extroverted. But remember, there wasn't any support for trait theory. It's not just extroverts who speak up and take the reins that make good leaders. People are also influenced by nonverbal cues and behavior. Have you ever just watched someone who's typically quiet and you watch them react to a situation, or you look to them to see how they would behave for guidance? Well, we all have, and whether you know it or not, people will watch and learn from your mannerisms and your behaviors. If someone learns and acts based on what they've seen from you, then in that moment, you are a leader. The fourth and last myth says, if everyone is a leader, then who is following? And this is a common question, but it assumes that we are in rigid roles all the time, which is not the case. There is a leadership economy, and that describes that we are all leaders and we are all followers. Just like we all offer services in our jobs here at the Muck, we also all buy or utilize the services here in the Muck. So in summary, you are a person who can be influenced by others, and you are also a person capable of influencing. So we are all leaders and we are all followers. It may seem like embracing your opportunities to be a leader is more work than you're interested in. If you feel stretched thin as it is, how can you make room for demonstrating leadership and positively impacting those around you? Well, in a poll taken during our live session of this presentation, 100% of our audience agreed that they have a responsibility to the Muck and to their department to embrace the leader in themselves. Has anyone you worked with before been a good role model or leader to you? Have you had a mentor that helped develop who you are today? Well, is there any way that you think you could pay those acts forward? Here are a few methods that you can pursue to help bring out the leader in you and to embrace the fact that you can positively impact those around you. You can begin by practicing more effective communication, mentoring someone, getting to know your team or coworkers better, challenging your staff so they grow in their skills, and balance your focus. If you're more focused on relationships at work, for example, maybe you could spend extra attention on those action items or task deadlines so you can balance between your task and your people focus. You can also own the leader in you by sharing your insights and experiences with others and or learning something new in your field. So, what are your thoughts and plans in reference to today's discussion? Are there any behaviors you'd like to adopt or modify? Consider what behaviors or attitudes you can change to be more effective in your leadership. And keep in mind the situational leader, who bends their actions and support based on the needs of the group. Please pause the presentation now to consider a few goals and write them down either in a notebook or on the provided worksheet. Thank you for participating in our online session of Everyone is a Leader. We hope you've enjoyed our online webinar, and we encourage you to attend a live presentation of our upcoming Employees Engaging in Excellence sessions. Thank you again, and have a great day.